Thank you very much, and let me start by saying it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here, indeed, on this panel. I have to say it was even more a pleasure to be Saturday evening in Stockholm at the Eurovision finals. It was tense, it was interesting, it was challenging, and it was, of course, jubilant towards the end. That was a competition in music, period, but needless to say, it highlighted again to an enormous audience across the world both the talent of Ukraine and some of the more tragic aspects of history, and I think that was indeed very good. Let me start by saying something about the other part of the story, because we are here to discuss Ukraine and the European Union. So let me start by the state of the European Union, because it's good to know the context. And my argument would be that we are now in a phase of history where the European Union is more needed than ever. That sounds strange, because you read in the newspapers the one crisis after the other. Yes, that's the point. We are in a situation where we face a number of different, very challenging situations. And the only way of dealing with these is to try to do it together. When Sweden entered the European Union, that is by now more than 20 years ago, we had two EU summit meetings every year, two of them. Then when we decided on the Lisbon Treaty some years ago, we changed that. So in the treaties it says there should be 4 summit meetings every year. Well, last year there were 12 summit meetings. And that is not because the prime ministers and presidents love to go to Brussels, nice as that might be. It is simply because there's no way in which we can meet the different challenges on our own. The nation states are too small to deal with the challenges of our time. We've had 3 summits so far this year, heading for a 4th within slightly more than a month. But this does show more needed than ever. There's a good story in the European economy, which is gradually picking up. You haven't heard, Geoffrey, for Greece for quite some time. You might, but otherwise, it is not it's a problematic case, but it's not an acute crisis. Spain is picking up, Portugal is picking up, Ireland is picking up. It's slight success story, the management of the economy. Refugee, Turkey, terror, very challenging indeed, and dominating the agenda. Digital issues, you don't hear very much about those. Digital single market, privacy shield, TTIP, shaping the framework for the global digital economy of the future, very much on the agenda. And then, of course, the most critical issue that we face, and that is the British referendum, but I skipped that. One of the effects of this is that issues of the neighborhood and enlargement has gone down slightly on the list of priorities in Brussels. Is this a bad or good thing? Well, not necessarily a bad thing, because the framework is in place. In terms of Ukraine, we have the DCFTA, we have the association agreement. There's the remaining issue of sorting out the Dutch consequences, and that will be on the table also for the summit meeting in June. I can see a solution that has fairly limited impact upon the agreement as such, but some maneuvering is clearly necessary. But the framework for the relationship between the EU and Ukraine is in place. It took some time and some trouble, mildly speaking, but it's there. And that means that from our side and from your side, what counts now is implementation, followed by implementation, and followed by implementation. Chapter by chapter, paragraph by paragraph, issue by issue. And be assured that the EU countries, the EU as such, and the EU individual countries, and the US and others, will be there to help as much as we can. But the success of Ukraine is in the hands of Ukraine. We can and we will be supportive within the framework that have been agreed, but it's up to the political environment of Ukraine to move the country forward. I'm impressed by what has been done. I think the Yatsenyuk government is the best government that Ukraine ever had. You might say that that's a fairly low standard, because this has been, as I've said very many times, probably the worst governed place of the ex-Soviet space in Europe for the last quarter of a century. So there was really room for picking up, and you've picked up at a considerable speed, with difficulties, with sacrifice, with a difficult economic situation, but you are on track. And that is appreciated by other countries. Being on track doesn't mean that you are there. And with the new government now there, it's a question both of that government showing its reform determination within the frameworks of the agreements that have been concluded, and then for us to be able to give the support to that determination of that government that we hope will be demonstrated. I'll skip all of the Minsk and Donbass and the other issues. Geoffrey dealt with those, and I agree with everything he said, Crimea as well, only saying that the fairly obvious thing. The best guarantee for the long-term stability and security of Ukraine rests in the democratic stability of the country and in its economic and political success. Putin miscalculated gravely in 2014 because he was absolutely convinced that Ukraine was going to unravel in the spring and summer of 2014. That did not happen. And although what the EU and US did was, I think, important in impressing things upon the Kremlin, it was the resistance and resilience of Ukraine societies that was decisive. Ukraine is stronger now than it was then, but Ukraine is not yet strong enough for the future. And that is just an urge to continue on the course, implementation, and rest assured that the support of the European Union will be there. A lot of other issues are on the European agenda, as I indicated to you, but the framework is there. Within that framework, our support will be firm and consistent.